Hello there and welcome back to my Lightroom Quickstart Bootcamp. I'm your host Brent Bergherm and I'm just glad to have you here as we continue our journey learning all these great things about Lightroom and what we need to know to get started and work effectively in Lightroom Classic. This video is all about the film strip, so let's get started. As we start looking at this film strip, you can see it's just a listing of all of those pictures that are in that folder that you have highlighted. So here I've got the May 12 folder highlighted, and we can see that, well, okay, all these images are here just like we have up at the grid. So it could feel a little bit repetitive. If we want to get rid of that, we just come down here to this little triangle, we click it, and then it's gone. And if we wanted to see it temporarily, we just have to come down here and mouse over it a little bit. Once that happens, we can do our business in the film strip, and then we come back out, and then of course it is, gone. It's disappeared. It's hidden. If we click that item, it will stay there, and then we can also resize it. So we can grab that element, we can drag it down, make them really small, make them a lot larger. So lots of different things here really quick with just your mouse as you're manipulating what's here in the film strip. And if you'll recall, when we have our navigator, if we have that active, we have it set in the preferences that says, show us in the navigator what image we are mousing over. So you can see I'm mousing over these two images, even though I have way over here, this image is selected. It's the image that I'm mousing over that actually shows in the navigator. And again, that is a setting that's in the preferences. There it is. It is show photos in navigator on mouse over. There's also a lot of functionality, whether you're in the central grid and you have an image and you right click on it. And I actually didn't cover that in the central grid video because I'm basically covering it here. When you are in the film strip and you right click on it, you have those same options. So just know that you have these same options in both locations, whether you're in the central grid or you're in the film strip. All right, so show in Finder. When we're just curious about something, if I were to hit this show in Finder, it's going to take this, it brought it over here for some reason. It's going to take this folder and it's going to bring it up for me in the Finder. I can hold Command and hold the title of the folder and I can see exactly where it's located. It's on my Photos Mark 6 drive, and then I've got the initial imports folder and then the dated folder there. And then it highlighted the particular image that we're talking about here. So we can see in the laundry list of images, this particular image is highlighted there. Now, sometimes that might be of interest to you because maybe for some reason you want to see the exact image in the Finder, you want to copy it, you want to, just whatever, quick access, you can do that right there in the Finder. Of course, if you're on a PC, I would expect this to say show in Explorer or something else like that. So this item, go to folder in library, that's where it's going to bring up the folder over here in the folders panel here in the library. And I'm going to go ahead and click this navigator to close that just so we can have more space showing up over here as we need it in the listing for our folder. If this image were in a collection, we could jump straight to the collection. And there's another thing to think about too when we're looking at things in the film strip and also here in the central grid. We have this little dot in the corner. So notice that dot in the upper right hand corner. If I were to click that, you didn't really see much happen at all, but take a look at what happens here when I now hit the B key. It says remove from target collection. And then we do it. And so there's this little indicator that says it's a part of a collection. And notice also what's happening down here. It added this little item. We have this, okay, this photo has GPS coordinates, photos in the collection. So yes, it added this item here when I hit that B key. Let's do that again. And you can see it removed that little item. These little items down here across the bottom are called badges. And so if I were to click on this, I can see, oh yes, it's in the March 2020 collection, where if I were to click on this one, it's going to take me over to the mapping module. And then if I click on this one, it's going to take me to the develop module. And notice some of those different behaviors of what's going on. The film strip is always there. It's dependent upon which folder you're in, but it's always there regardless of what module you're in. I could go to the book, the slideshow. All of these things are driven off the film strip. And so that film strip, I like to always have it visible, even though I might have in the central grid, I might have that visible with all these different images. I still would have the film strip visible because it just is, I want it visible everywhere else. It's just that helpful to me. All right, let's go back to our drop up menu or drop down menu, however you'd like to call it. We do have a few great options here, edit in. And so all of these different pieces of software, so Luminar 4 that I have installed on one and on one portrait, on one resize. I can even open it as a smart object in Photoshop. There's lots of different options here. Of course, the default is to open it in Photoshop. And lots of different options for which program you wish to open the images in. These are going to be different software applications that have some kind of connection, or Lightroom is going to have some kind of connection to it. It will package up the image, it'll send it out there, and then when you save that image from wherever you're at, you'll basically get dumped back into Lightroom, and you'll be able to then manage that image in Lightroom. If we had more than one image selected, we would have these other items. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's select 3 images here, and then we will go ahead and hit edit in, and now we have these other items to look at. Merge to panorama in Photoshop, merge to HDR in Photoshop, open as layers in Photoshop. So these different options for what we want to do with opening them inside Photoshop. If we were to have panorama images, then this would actually make sense. We could actually do that. This is obviously not a panorama example that I have, so that wouldn't make any sense. The HDR option is to, if you were to do an exposure change in your capturing. So let's say your first image was at the proper exposure, what the camera thought was proper exposure. Your second image was maybe 2 stops underexposed, and your third image was 2 stops overexposed. And maybe you even went to 4 stops underexposed and 4 stops overexposed with multiple different exposures. That gives you that wide variety of tonal values, from everything in details in the shadows to all the details in the highlights. And then Photoshop, you're going to rely on Photoshop here to blend those together, to bring those in and blend those together, so all those tones are then visible in your image. Now, it sounds really exciting. It sounds really cool. The only problem is with that, it can start to feel fairly flat. It can start to feel a little bit just not very exciting when you do that. And so you want to be able to do that with, basically, if you have time to practice it, you have time to learn it, you have time to invest in learning that tool, then certainly I say go for it. But I do think there's going to be some better tools out there for doing what we call exposure blending. All right, let's move down to this next one, photo merge. I'm in this one quite a bit. This is the items that are going to leave it in Lightroom, and Lightroom will handle all of these items here. So HDR. So this would be an HDR blend using the raw image data, well, of course, Photoshop is going to use the raw image data too, but it has to interpret it into its own TIFF-like or Photoshop file-like image data in order to give you that raw image. Where here in Lightroom, it's going to create a DNG file for you. That's Adobe's own digital negative. And that can be a really cool thing when you're trying to have maximum flexibility with processing your image. I mentioned before here in the Photoshop idea where you're doing an HDR in Photoshop, and I mentioned how it can feel a little bit flat, a little bit boring, or whatever the case might end up being. Well, certainly the same thing can happen here with a Lightroom generated HDR, but you have all of the quick tools here in processing of Lightroom to maybe swing some of those tonal values one way or the other, to maybe enhance a little bit of contrast, maybe to localize some controls. Certainly you have that in Photoshop too, but you have the benefit of the raw file and still having access to the raw data, and that's really awesome. That's a really big help when you're going for blending these things into an HDR fashion. Again, personally, I think this is better, but again, I say this is still something where if I were to do exposure blending, I would rather dive into this idea of luminosity masking. That is all done in Photoshop, but you still have much more nuanced control, much more wide control, focused in control, every bit of control that you could think of you have available to you, and the image can start to, well, it definitely comes out potentially looking much more realistic, much more Well, I guess if you wanted to, it could be ethereal too. It doesn't have to be realistic, but you have more control. That's the point of it. I did skip over one here, open as layers in Photoshop. So I could do this and basically give me one Photoshop document, which each of these 3 pictures on a separate layer in Photoshop. Now you might be wondering, why would you do that? Well, if I were to do something luminosity masking oriented, or if I were to do something focus stacking oriented, maybe I wanted to do something otherwise compositing in Photoshop. This is a great way to do that. It dumps it all into one Photoshop document to begin with. That can be very helpful. And then here under photo merge again, we have panorama. This is Lightroom taking care of the panorama merging. I really do like merging items in Lightroom because you're going to have that raw data still accessible to you. It takes the raw data from your, in this case, CR2 images, it blends them together, makes an Adobe DNG image, and you still have that raw capability in everything you're processing. And it's just a lot of great detail, a lot of great opportunities for pushing the image. If you need to swing the exposure one way or the other, it's all there in the raw data. It's really nice to have. And then this idea of HDR panorama. This is also done right there in Lightroom, where you can take 2, 3, 4 different exposures in the same frame. And then you come over here to this next framing and you take your same exact exposures. And then you go to the next frame, take your same exact exposures. And then Lightroom will just blend all those together and give you that high dynamic range and panorama all coming in together. It works pretty good. But again, you have an opportunity for it to be really flat. And so it takes a little bit of extra processing to make it turn out looking really good. This enhanced details item, this can work pretty well on some images and it can fall flat on other images. So if you're looking to do a little bit of extra work where you're saying, I need to really just give it the best. I need to really print this big. I need to get this fine nuanced detail coming through. The enhanced details can do pretty good depending again on your images. I have tried this. Now this was about a year, maybe a year and a half ago now. I have tried this on some Fuji X-Trans sensor-based images. And depending on your subject, it just fell apart. It just made it even worse. So there's still some challenges depending on your camera. There's still some challenges depending on your subject. But overall, there is a slight enhancement I did notice when using enhanced details. Now here we just have a menu item of saying the set flag. We've looked at it already on how to flag an image, how to unflag an image or reject it. If you flag it, it's the P key. If you unflag it, it's the U key. If you reject it, it's the X key. You can also do that down here where you can see we have the little item right here in the corner. I can click on that item and that will flag it for me. I can click here and that will flag it for me. And now I happen to only be in these 3 images. See, this is only going to reference the images that I have selected, whereas this one I can just do whatever because I'm, wherever. It doesn't matter. I don't have these selected, it doesn't matter. One thing that's interesting to note, take a look at this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch us to these 3 images over here. I'm going to highlight this image on the Loupe View, and then I'm going to tell it to flag these images. Notice how it only flags the one image that's actually active. Even though I have all of these others selected, it did not flag all of these images. That's something that you just have to get used to. There's some places, sometimes where I'm kind of like, oh man, I made a mistake. I'm glad I only did it to one image. But usually if I've got them selected, usually my thinking is I want those things to all be affected, right? So you have to be in grid view in order for that to take place. So I'll go ahead and add a few more to the selection. And then when I hit flag, then all of them are flagged because we're in grid view. So there is a difference there between what you do and what the behavior is in grid view because you have it in grid view versus when you're in Loupe View, even though you have it all selected here and it shows as selected in the Filmstrip, again, just a different behavior and something that we just have to get used to. All right, let's take another look at a few of these other items in the drop down or drop up menu. We can set a rating. So the star ratings, Now again, here you can do it right there in that section, set it to 5 stars. But what could be fun, if you need to, you could come to this decrease rating, and then you can see how it just decreases at 1 star level. I personally don't ever find value in that, but hey, it's there. You also have the opportunity to set your color label. Again, that's right here. So why you would go through the menu, that's not something I would do, but there you have it. You can add to target collection. We've already seen that little item in the upper right hand corner, that little dot in the upper right hand corner, or your B key will do that. Now stacking, this is a lot of fun. Now let me get rid of that set rating to 0 overlay. Okay, there we go. Stacking can be a lot of fun. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to go ahead and select these. Well, let's just take those 6 images, right? And I'll go ahead and I'll stack them, but I'm also going to then do the the keyboard shortcut. All right, so group into stack. Notice what it does. Whoa, it just took all those 6 images and squished them together. And so now if I were to hit this, take a look too, up here in the grid anyway, it gave us a little bit of a different indicator suggesting there's something else going on here. So there's something coming through. And okay, that tells us they're stacked. All right. So here we have the stack icon down in the Filmstrip again. I click on that and it will expand all those images. If I click on that little badge where it says 1 of 6, that's where it will collapse it. Click on that 6 again, and it will expand it again. Now I can select them all again, then I can right click on it, and then I just go to stacking and I can say unstack. All right, so now they're all independent images again. So if you wanted the keyboard shortcut, it's just Command G. So basically thinking of it as grouping images together, Command G will put those together. Command Shift G will get rid of the stack. So it's the equivalent of unstacking, Command Shift G. Or if you're on a PC, I would imagine it's Control Shift G. We'll do the unstacking. You have other options where you can split the stack, remove an image from a stack. So that's kind of cool. I've already showed you how we collapse the stack, and you can expand the stack as well. Move to top of stack. So if you're on a specific image and you wanted to move it up to the top of the stack, that's how you would do that. Or move it up in the stack, move it down in the stack. This is just ordering the stack and exactly which order you want it. I never really do that because if I ever stack images, they're already in the order that I want them to be in anyway, because it has something to do with whether it's a focus stack like I have here. That's why I have so many copies of these flowers, is because I did a focus stack. Took a picture, adjusted the focus just very slightly, took another picture, adjustment, take another picture, adjustment. And so it ended up with bunches of images of what looks like the exact same framing. So it would make a lot of sense for me to go ahead and stack these items and to leave them stacked. But, it is, I just haven't gotten to it yet. Yeah, as you can see, it's the last thing I shot. So I just haven't gotten to it yet. All right. One other thing that I want to cover with stacking that I really want to drive home, because this can really mess you up. Let's see if Adobe fixed it. So I'm going to go ahead and select all of these images. All right. And so what I'm going to do now, notice I'm in the grid view. All right. And actually, I don't think this matters if you have the grid view or not. So I've selected all of the images, and now I'm going to do a renaming of the images where I'm just going to go hit this rename photos, and let's see, it is Northeast Oregon, and I'll go ahead and do sample because I don't want it to mess anything up really. Since it's a sample, I'm not going to worry about it. It literally was 21. It needs to be 21 there, but I digress. I will do that. Let's see, I have 3 digits in my sequencing up, so that's good. That will get me covered. All right, so let's go ahead and do it. Hit OK. So it says it's renaming 240 images. All right, but notice there's 250 images in the whole in the whole folder here. So why did it only name 240 images? It is because, now I'm going to go ahead and deselect these guys, and it is because these images that were stacked, now this one got renamed. Notice that has the SAMP in it, right? But over here, image 8, that image didn't get renamed. What a pain. So what you have to do is you have to have all of those stacks expanded in order for those files to also be renamed. So now let's go ahead and hit Command A. Let's go back and let's pretend we're going to rename these all over again. And then we're going to hit OK. And now it says, now these are renamed. Everything is renamed. Everything is put where it needs to be put in the order of things, and everything is happy. So if you're going to use stacking, make sure if you have yet to rename your images, make sure that you have those stacks expanded, and then you're going to be good to go. That's where in this item here, where it tells you to expand all stacks, that can be really valuable, because you can just say, hey, you know what? I don't remember. Did I expand my stacks or not? Just go ahead and click that, and then go ahead and do your renaming, and you're guaranteed to rename every single image within that folder. All right, this next item, virtual copy. I love virtual copies. Virtual copies are amazing because it allows you to have two different processing settings on the same exact image. Now, what a virtual copy does, let's also notice what's going on here. I have 250 images in this folder, okay? And so when I create a virtual copy, it's going to spend a few seconds here, and it's going to do it. All of a sudden, now I got 251. All right, so when I go and I tell this to show in Finder, of all of my image files, now these are the RAWs and the TIFFs only, because I did do some focus stack TIFFs, so those have come back as well. And I would presume that I have, here it is, I have another virtual copy. So down here in the lower right-hand corner, you can see I've got another virtual copy here. So of image files only, I've only got 249 showing up in Finder, but here in Lightroom it shows 251. It's because virtual copies are counted in Lightroom, but nowhere else, because it's not a real file. It's virtual. That's the whole point of it. It's a virtual copy of it, because the way Lightroom works, because the way raw processing works, when you are making changes. So let's dive in just very briefly here and go to the develop module and make a quick change to the exposure. All right, so I come back over here. That's the exact same file, but of course, nothing was changed. I can play around with two different types of processing on the same file, and then I can make a decision what's the best for me. It's really, we saw earlier how when we were in this compare view, we could take a look at this and be like, okay, which one is best? Which one is better, right? So when we're able to take a look at that with this time though, with the exact same image, there's just a benefit there. I think it's a fine benefit there, but I just want to reiterate, it did not make a new instance of that image on your hard drive. It simply said in Lightroom, hey, we're going to take that same data, and now we're going to take it and we're going to apply this set of processing to it. We're going to apply this set of the exposure, all those other things that we haven't gotten to yet in this Quickstart Bootcamp, which is coming in section 3 of this Quickstart Bootcamp, and we'll get there. But it's just saying, hey, we're going to store these additional instructions for how this would be processed, how this would be modified. All right, one thing to also look at too, take a look here. And that is, well, let's get out of this so we don't have that anymore. That is trying to think about, how did it treat the image, the virtual copy, when I was doing the renaming, right? So here we've got, and I'm looking down here at the file name, I've got 001, all right, this one is 002. Now I come over here, it still is the same file name. So at least Lightroom is smart in saying, well, I'm not going to make that 003. That wouldn't make any sense, would it? No, I don't think it would. But it did put the copy 1 after it. And then here we go, of course, 003, 004, and so on. And then this one is 5, and then this is 5 with a copy 1 after it. Now, if you want to get rid of that, you just right-click on it. You can tell it to hit Remove Photo. And since it's only a virtual copy, the only option you have is to remove from Lightroom. If you were to do that on a real photo, now this is a real photo that has a real file, real data on the hard drive itself that's individual to this image, right? It is its own file. If I hit Remove Photo, it's going to say, do you want to remove from Lightroom or do you want to delete it from the disk? It gives you those options. The remove from Lightroom is only going to say, okay, Lightroom will no longer care about this image. It will stay in that folder in the Finder until you do something else with it. But Lightroom is just saying, I've forgotten about it. And it just doesn't care anymore. Now, if you delete from disk, Lightroom will go ahead and take that image and it will put it in your trash folder. And then once you go and empty the trash, then the image is gone. So while delete from disk is not an instantaneous delete from disk, it's the next time you empty your trash, it's going to be deleted from disk. I will, of course, hit cancel right now because I'm not prepared to make that a decision saying I want to delete that particular image. All right, let's get back into the grid view and let's take a look at a few more items in this drop-up menu. All right, our develop settings. So I'm only going to look at a few items here. We do have some quick settings like auto white balance. We could set a few things, convert it to black and white really quick. We could reset them. So if we made some developed settings, we could hit the reset button and just go to straight out of camera and not have any of those other settings going on. Update to current process version. This is if I had an old image that I shot, let's say 10 years ago. I don't know. I'm just picking a number out of a hat here. I shot it 10 years ago and I haven't revisited that image for quite a while. What Adobe is doing is to say, you know what, there might be a different processing that was applied to that image. And since they have upgraded, to 10 years worth of knowledge in processing raw files, maybe they'll have a better chance of processing that file once again if you were to upgrade its process version. And so you're going to be able to upgrade its process version, and that's Adobe's latest attempt at processing that raw file. Even if it's an older file, if it's a newer file, it doesn't matter. You're just going to bring it up to the newest version of processing that image, that raw data. Then we have a few other things, paste your settings. These are going to be your develop settings items. So if I wanted to copy these develop settings and paste them on another image, I could do that. Simple copy paste type items. When we get to the develop module, I'm going to actually show you the synchronization function that actually makes things a lot easier, I think anyway. And you don't, if it's one image to the next, yeah, not a big deal, copy paste, but the sync settings, that's where it's good stuff for me. On these metadata items, especially when you come to presets, there's not many things that I like to do all the time that isn't already done, I guess I should say. And that is, I have my camera, I usually program my camera to plug in my copyright information as I shoot it. So as soon as I shoot it and it writes it to disk, my copyright info is also there in camera and it just tags along with the image. And so those are the things that are really, really important to me. And then Lightroom can usually automate other things. We looked at on the import process how we can tell Lightroom to take that GPS metadata and assign city and state information in the metadata. So I don't really need to rely too much on some of these metadata presets. Now I could do the same thing though, copy the metadata and paste it. So like if I had keywords and other things like that, I could go through and copy those items and work with those different images that way. And of course, synchronizing the metadata. Rotate, we've already seen that with the different keys. Now I hid them. If we come over here and we put those items up again, we have the opportunity to rotate the image. So let's go ahead and rotate that back. What is it? To be to the left. There we go. And then we have, this one is really good. This metadata one here. This is going to be covered in the last video of this free series, and that is going to be the idea of backup and the idea of getting our data secure and doing what we can to double save ourselves, I guess. Is that the best way to put it? If you'll recall, when we were taking a look at this image, I'm going to hit this show in Finder again. We had all these down at the bottom. As I scroll down, I have these filtered by kind. You can see all of the CR2s are on the top of the file stack, and then all of these XMPs are down below. Well, let's go ahead and sort them by name and see what happens here. So we have 01200120 XMP. That XMP data, that is your metadata for everything about that photo. And you'll notice I have that being written with every single image right off the bat. Now, I'll dive in a little deeper about why I do this in that later video. I'm not going to get too derailed now, but if you wanted to do that on a one-off basis, you could do that right here, where you can say save metadata to file. It's going to put that XMP data right there. It's what we call a sidecar file. It's going to put it right there in your Finder, right there, same file name, right next to the original image, and that is the processing, that is all of your metadata from the library module, all of the image, process from the develop module. All of that stuff is in that XMP file, and you'll have another copy then of that data, which is your processing data. So if you wanted to do that, you have the opportunity to do it there. You could also read the metadata from the file. So if there was updated metadata outside of Lightroom, you can then tell Lightroom, well, hey, I know on this image I did something additional somewhere else, and I want to bring that metadata in. And so this is where you're going to bring that metadata in. For me, I never use this. Everything is done in Lightroom. I never use this read metadata from file. But if you needed to, there it is. Export. We have a whole nother video just on export dedicated to this. It's coming up at the end here of this section 2 of the Lightroom Quickstart Bootcamp. So I'm not going to hardly talk about any of these items, just saying, hey, here's export. We'll get to it later as well. I like this idea, emailing a photo. Basically, it's going to package up your image, take your primary email app and toss it in there. That could be really convenient. Not something I use very often, if at all, but it could be pretty convenient. We've already seen remove photo, and then what are view options? Basically, it's just these things, do we want to show these little badges? Do we want to ignore the clicks on the badges? And that's also actually a preferences setting, so we just have the opportunity to change our preferences right here, right quick. Show ratings, pics, and whatnot. Show index numbers. So if we wanted to do that, notice how this little 32, 34, whatever, referencing the same numbers that we have here, actually has obviously a 33 because there's 32, whatever. Anyway, to me, that just takes up more space, and I really don't care to see those index numbers in my Filmstrip. But if that's something that you wanted to do, by all means, go for it. Show image info tooltips. So these are going to be the little things that pop up right there like that. And then this other one, show photos in Navigator on mouseover. There's just another opportunity to select it there rather than going all the way into your preferences. Okay, that pretty much wraps us up for understanding all these things about how to deal with the Filmstrip, what the settings are, how to utilize them. I look forward to seeing you in the next video where we're going to take a look at all those things in the right-hand panel. We're going to look at the histogram, quick develop, keyword lists, and we'll see you there. Until then, happy shooting.